Hello, chefs. This is Chef's PSA Podcast. I'm your host, André Natera. On today's episode, we have guest chef Gabe Erales. Gabe Erales is the chef owner of Bacalar restaurant in Austin and Ometeo in Washington, D.C. He's the winner of Top Chef Season 18. This is a fun conversation. We talk about things to look out for when you're starting your first restaurant, why everyone needs mentorship, the path to success, and we discuss hip hop. Stay tuned. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. It feels like it was just last week.
Because it was, right?
Yeah.
I was just coming out of Target, and the elevator door opened. And as I was opening it, there was a pit bull standing right there in front of me, off leash. And I just like, oh shit, am I about to get eaten up? And it closed. I was like pushing the button. I was like, oh, please close fast, close fast. Yeah, anyway. So my heart's beating a little bit fast because I thought I was about to get mauled by a dog off leash. It wasn't near its owner, and anyway, random.
There's always a stray dog in the neighborhood, and for me, I see the kids running around. I'm like terrified of. You hear about these kids getting mauled, but that's not to say they can't do that to an adult.
No, I mean, yeah, exactly. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is you just opened up Bacalar, and I know you have another restaurant in Washington, D.C., and one of the things that a lot of people ask questions about is they want to understand what goes into opening up a restaurant and structuring deals. And since both of these are relatively fresh in memory, what are some things that the average person that's looking to open up their very first restaurant, what are some things that they should know, that they should look out for, that they don't always think about?
I think the first and probably the most important one is the financial aspect, and understanding that, if you budget, I'm going to throw a random number out there, but if you budget $500,000, you're probably going to find another $500,000 in surprises throughout the build-out process. And, I think that that's really important if you're doing it on, as an individual and you're funding it yourself. But it's equally important if you're doing it with partners or investors, because at some point you have to go back and ask for more money, and that money needs to be justified. So I think the financial aspect of adding X percentage plus to your budget for the hidden surprises. One of my employees now is working on a side project for themselves that, it's not really a restaurant, but it's a kind of an educational workshop, Molino type situation. And, they're building out this project. They got this beautiful Molino going in place. They found a place that was really cheap rent, and then, they come to work and they're just like, there's no electrical to install this Molino, and the city's got to come, and it's going to be another $15,000 or whatever. And it's just, if you're doing things on a shoestring budget and you've got it all planned out to the dime, and then something like that pops up, then it's a major roadblock. So I think understanding the implications of the difficulties and the hidden surprises and financials, and there's always something that's going to come up. So I think that the financial one is the most important one. Number two is just understanding, you think you may understand your customer base, you think you understand the neighborhood, the area, and you don't really understand it till you're in it and you see what's happening after you open your doors. So there's a lot of things that you really can't, nobody's psychic in this industry, and no one will ever be psychic. So you just have to plan for the unexpected and be able to adapt and move around within the space after you get the doors open.
The unknown. When you're opening up something, and in your case, you have here in Bacalar, which, by the way, people that don't know Bacalar, I think personally is one of the most beautiful restaurants in Austin. I love the artwork, and there's so much attention to detail in the design and the look of it. But at what point, you're talking about the food. At what point do you start with one thing, and how quickly would you adjust if if people are voting with their dollars, so to speak? So maybe they want this item, or they're asking for more of this. How do you as the chef / owner look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, because the restaurant, Meryl, who's one of the partners in the restaurant, also the restaurant designer, she did such an amazing job building out the restaurant that, we got to a point where, like, wow, does it feel so nice that this is like only the perception is it's a fine dining special occasion restaurant. And that's not what we built it to be. We wanted it to be a restaurant where you can come every day. And, I feel that the menu is really accessible. The price point's really accessible. So trying to change the perception and pivot for lack of better terms, to make everyone understand that you can come here and have a casual meal every day, even though the space feels much more beautiful and thoughtful and intentional is really, really important.
And you also have the taco window, right?
Yeah, and then we built that Tomalo, the taqueria right next door, which is open every day from 8 to 2, and you can go get amazing tacos, burritos, tortas, and that's the fun part, because that's kind of been like a creative outlet for us to use byproduct in the restaurant. And we've really empowered our taqueras there to really own the taqueria, obviously with guidance. So that's been really fun. And I mean, I think the tacos are outstanding. The burritos outstanding. I mean, you had one last week.
It was good. It was good. It was good. I was thinking about, the style of food for people that don't know. So I should maybe give some context. For people that don't know, you and I are from the same city in El Paso, Texas. And ironically enough, we grew up on the same block, which people don't know that. But knowing that, I understand the food culture in El Paso. You understand the food culture in El Paso. But the style of food that you're doing at Bacalar is not necessarily the food that comes from that city. And last week we did a dinner at your place, El Paso family meal. How different is the food at Bacalar? Because I think people have this misconception of Mexican food, especially here in the States and specifically in Texas. It's enchiladas, it's fajitas, it's you're playing within these parameters. But you've not only colored outside the lines, you're also cooking from your own heritage, your own history, and specific regions. So I guess my question is, tell us a little bit about that and how you came to the conclusion that that's what you wanted to do with your food.
When I first, started to connect with you and meet you, it was really surprised to learn that we grew up in the same neighborhood. It's amazing. Obviously the more we dig into it, the more we find how small the industry is, right? Yeah. And people from El Paso always seem to find each other. But for me personally, my family moved from the Yucatan to El Paso. I was born in El Paso, but obviously spending a lot of time in Mexico and whatnot, I was just really strongly influenced by that culture. And I always felt that even living in El Paso, that the food that I was eating at home was so different from what I was eating in El Paso. Mm-hmm. There is the borderland cuisine of like northern Mexico influence of, like you said, like enchiladas and chile rellenos and carne asadas and things like that. And that was more of the norteño Sonoran style influence that you find that has leaked over and bled into Tex-Mex and what you see a lot in Central Texas, all over Texas, which is, kind of what makes my other project in Washington, D.C., Ometeo, really fun, is that I've never really explored that side of the cuisine. I've always been so immersed in regional Mexican cuisine, but I had always want to really explore the roots of where my family come. On my dad's side, there's Lebanese, there's Mexican. On my mom's side, there's Spanish, there's English, and all of them were, immigrated to Mexico and born in Mexico. And then we have these strong Yucatan roots, even down into Belize, where my grandma grew up. And the diversity of that was so interesting to me. And I think that people tend to forget how strongly influenced Mexican food is outside of actual Mexico. It just didn't, the same way that French Creole cuisine in Louisiana came from outside of the States and influenced that. There's that same parallel in Mexican cuisine. And I really wanted to explore that in a time where, Baja cuisine is having its major moment, and Oaxacan cuisine is having a major moment, and Mexico City street food, Mexico City street food is getting Michelin stars.
Right. So really quick, can we jump on that?
Yeah.
What did you think of Michelin's release in Mexico, and what do you think of some of the restaurants getting it?
I have a close friend who has a little wine bar in Polanco called Malish, and he came to cook at Bacalar, and it's a very, very small 40-seat restaurant, and he's doing everything himself, and he's it's a really, really like small operation, but I was just blown away to the fact that the Michelin system saw that and gave him a star. Yeah. And I was so happy for him, and so it's nice to see when the stars are deserving. And it's interesting to see when, like the taqueria, like, is that very cool? Yeah. But how are the people that are busting their ass every day, grinding hard to not necessarily earn a star, but deserve one? And they're like, oh, this, the taqueria that is putting a piece of carne asada and salsa on the plate got a Michelin star, Because, Michelin, and I'm no expert on Michelin ratings or how, stars are awarded or not, but I know that service is an aspect of it, right? And everything beyond, including the food. And so how do you arrive at giving a taqueria a star? You hear of these like Subway sushi places in Japan that get stars or things like that. And it's interesting to me to see how the diversity of that falls out.
And there's rumors that Michelin's coming to Texas. I mean, rumors. A lot of people know, but there's rumors. What do you think about that? I mean, what's your stance on them coming to Texas, specifically Austin?
Yeah, I think, Austin, the landscape in the culinary scene in Austin has changed so dramatically over the last 5 years, but I think more so in the post-COVID that, there's a lot more money, there's a lot more openings every day. And I think that, there's definitely room for that. And there's people that want to go out and spend money on that type of meal, I think, having somebody like Chef Matt Peters in town who has that breadth and that knowledge and experience in doing it, is it someone that could pave the way for that and probably will. But I think that there's other, that the majority of the restaurants, with the exception of a few, don't really have that in their tool belt to be, I don't think you put an Austin Michelin star restaurant on the same page as a New York Michelin star restaurant, in my opinion. Yeah. But that's not to say it can't happen. And I think that, it's definitely can be good for business. It can be bad for business. In a time where costs are already high, Austin is a very expensive city. It's interesting to see what will happen.
I mean, you have all this tech money moving in. Elon Musk is here. Every other podcaster, every big podcaster moved to Austin. And so you see this money coming in. Austin, when I moved here 10 years ago, let's call it, it was very different than Austin today. Not just in what people wanted to eat, but also in the style of restaurant that existed. I think when I first moved here, there was a lot of patio seating. It was very rustic. People were just, I hate to say, they were just throwing shit at the wall and see what stuck. Yeah. But that was how the food felt. And now it seems a little bit more deliberate. It's a little bit more posh. There's, I don't want to say nicer restaurants, but nicer in terms of design. There's a lot more money spent on restaurants now than I think 10 years ago. And so you see Austin evolving with Michelin coming to Texas potentially. Now that's not official, but that's word on the street. I could see Austin quickly evolving into potentially one of the stronger markets in culinary because the chefs here will adapt pretty quick. And like you said, we have some heavy hitters here, yourself, Matt, Kevin, what he's doing with his whole group in Tavel. So there's a lot of heavy hitters that I think are going to push to really put the city on the map. Anyway,
the thing that comes to mind immediately is Bryce Gilmore and Barley Swine, and they literally paved the way for tasting menus in Austin. Them and obviously like a place like Wink way back in the day and things like that. But you see what they're doing at Barley Swine still after all these years, and it's beautiful, it's amazing, and there's something to be said about having restaurants that don't have a lot of turnover in their chefs. And I remember there was a time when there was 5 chefs at Barley Swine and they hadn't left in God knows how many years, and just trying to get a stage there was hard.
What do you think about we talked a little bit about your restaurant, so going back to that, you're coming off Top Chef. I'm assuming a lot of opportunities are being thrown at you. And especially at that point in time, especially what you've done with Bacalar, this is the first opportunity for you at bat to really be a chef owner. How did you filter out some of the noise and recognize that that's not a good opportunity versus this is a good opportunity? And what are some of the things that you look for, especially advice that we could give young up and coming chefs that are eventually going to be in that same position that are going to have a lot of opportunities thrown at them?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, every opportunity is not a good opportunity. And a chef told me that once a long time ago, and it's always stuck to me because there's a lot of people that just talk and they're like, hey, we should do this, we should do that, I found this great space, blah blah blah, and you don't really know what somebody's true intentions are until you're actually in it and going through in it. But I think the most important thing is if you're financing it yourself, that's one thing, because ultimately you have complete control of your destiny. If you have a handful of partners, you have to balance personalities, you have to balance intentions, you have to balance really just kind of what their ethos is and see if it aligns with yours. And I think that one of the most important things that I like to think about is what your true intentions are with the restaurant and your culture and how you want to treat people, and just making sure that that's in alignment with who you're working with. Because if it's not, you will find that out, and it can change the dynamics and the landscape in which you operate. For me, Bacalar and Ometeo Ometeo was actually conceptualized and brought to life way before Bacalar in early 2021. And I had met the group of the restaurant group that I'm working with over there early on, and we had started working that in 2021 before Bacalar was even really came to life. So it was a really, really different dynamic, and it's a restaurant group that has multiple restaurants, are very successful, versus my partners in Bacalar who were just breaking into hospitality, came from a real estate and design business. So those two landscapes were different, and I think navigating them and trying to align and sharing experiences to make sure that you guys have a common goal is super important.
So do you think it's better for someone that's looking to raise capital and start their own restaurant? Do you think it's better to have a lot of investors, so everyone has a smaller percent of the say, or do you think it's better to have one or two bigger investors?
I think it's really, at the end of the day, it's really about how deals are structured and what's put down on paper contractually. At the end of the day, the fact of the matter is the person writing the check is going to have the biggest say.
Yeah, true.
Whether you like it or not. And and that's absolutely fair.
Yeah, they're taking on the most amount of risk, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think that that's really, really fair, and that should always be kept in the back of your mind as a chef and the operator, because there's a balance that you have to find, and it's really making sure that you guys are on the same page and want the same ultimate goal, and that's probably the most important piece for me is really balancing that relationship.
Looking at your career, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be the opening of this restaurant, but what are some of the challenges that you faced as a chef, and what did you do to overcome them, and how do you reframe it?
My trajectory was so different and so weird that I don't think it's kind of in the cookie cutter ring mold. I started working in restaurants when I was 15. I have 5 brothers, and almost all of my brothers worked in restaurants. So I was kind of always in a restaurant, either hanging out or working for my brother. I started working at a Steak and Ale in El Paso when I was 15, and I was like,
Shout out Steak and Ale.
shout out Steak and Ale. The bread and the prime rib. Yeah, so I was working at the Steak and Ale restaurant at 15 years old, and my brother had me bussing tables. He had me doing, dishes, maintenance, prep. I was doing a little bit of all, but it was also really, really exciting to me to be. I felt pretty cool to be like, playing football in high school, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go cook some food this weekend and do that. And then I just ended up working in restaurants all through high school, all through college. I moved to Austin to go to UT and study engineering, and I worked in restaurants while I was doing that. Graduated from UT and stopped working in restaurants because I was focused on engineering, and then I just realized that it was really, really something I truly loved. And I had this weird trajectory where I was doing both engineering and cooking, and I did that for a really, really long time until I got to this point where I was just like, okay, this is not healthy. This is not a good work-life balance.
Right. What kind of restaurants were you working in then?
So in college, I was still working at I was working at Steak and Ale. My brother had a Tex-Mex restaurant in Westlake that I was working at, and that was the one I was at for a really, really long time. So it wasn't like knee-deep head. I mean, and also at that time, this was like talking early 2000s. There wasn't a lot of big hitter restaurants here.
Yeah, I mean, it was like Uchi and then everyone else, right?
Like early 2000s. So there wasn't a lot out there at this time. And then I came back from engineering and really started getting into cooking again, and also had concurrently enrolled in culinary school and went to culinary school after I got both my bachelor's and master's in engineering. So there was like this parallel path that I was also in 2 different industries but working towards the same goal.
Did you miss the engineering side?
I don't. I mean, obviously, there's as a father and a husband, I miss the balance and the stability that life provided me, but it wasn't as fulfilling as I'm fulfilled by cooking and being in a restaurant and creating and sharing culture and food with people and creating memories with people.
Yeah, it's a different vibe. We were, for people that don't know, we did a dinner at your restaurant last week, El Paso family meal, and there was a lot of chefs in there. And your kitchen is one of the most welcoming kitchens that I've ever done a dinner in. Everyone on your team was so nice and respectful and happy and friendly and willing to help. And I mean, you helped me out tremendously. And I can't thank you enough for that. But it's interesting how you create that sort of environment, because you've been in other kitchens, like they don't want you there.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. but you seem to have created a really good workplace culture there. Everyone seemed to be engaged on board, and honestly, sharp. All your cooks were really sharp, knew what they were doing, hustle. I don't know the name of the young man that was, you said he was maybe 18 or 19. He's like fast, good. I was watching him work. I was like, holy shit, that kid's good. Yeah, he's going to be somebody.
Kai's a good boy, man. He's a really sharp cook, and he came in 18 years old, and I'll never, I talk about this all the time in the kitchen. I'm like, I'll never forget Kai's interview. He didn't really have much of a resume. He showed up, sat in front of me, was smacking gum with his mouth open. And I was like, oh my God, who is this kid? And I was just like, well, let's just give him a shot. And, he was one of those people that just came in and really impressed the whole team and good attitude. Yellowstone boy. Yeah. Good kid.
Yeah, just like the show, right? So I know you were on Top Chef 18 winner. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, so I had Aaron on last week who was on Netflix Final Table. And one of the things that we talked about is for someone going on that show, so let's just say someone comes to you and said, hey, I'm about to go on that show. I need some advice. What is something that goes on, if you're allowed to speak to it, so maybe you have an NDA and you can't speak to it, but what is something that would help someone prepare to be successful on that show that we don't see because we're the audience?
Yeah. I think the most important thing about being on a show like that, and I think I watched Final Table actually, and I enjoyed watching Aaron a lot, and Tim Hollingsworth and all those guys. It was incredible. But I think the thing that is most helpful for anyone doing that type of cooking is to have your own cooking voice. Yeah. The minute you start trying to cook for judges, you fail. Okay. If you're trying to cook somebody else's food and you're not being honest to yourself, you see right through that and you fail. And I think that I personally felt that that's where I was successful on Top Chef in terms of my cooking. Is I had a vision in my mind of what I wanted my food to be and what I wanted to express in my food about where I come from and who I am as a chef.
Did you ever have to force it? Like, I'm just making this up. The challenge wasn't that, but fuck it, I'm going to go this way.
So you see it on TV and it's like, all right, your challenge is this.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. And yes, you don't really have a lot of time to react, but you do have some time to think. And in that time to think, I was always thinking to myself, how do I make this challenge, this dish, my food? And how do I make it speak to who I am as a chef and represent who I am? And that's kind of what I always. And the other thing that was really important is not trying to do something for the first time unless you really had to. Right. I think that
I tell people that for interviews too. Like if you're on a cooking interview, don't make something just because you think it sounds cool and you're in the restaurant. Like only do your greatest hits. Yeah. You might be tired of making it, but they've never seen it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And showing up to these competitions, you've got to have at least 60 to 70 dishes that you can cook out of your back pocket with your eyes closed and be able to adapt them, saying, I can do this. Maybe I don't have this ingredient, but this works perfectly.
So if it's not the beef, it's the pork, but it's the same thing. Yeah.
And for me, I think I came off that show and everyone was like, oh, your sauces and your sauce work and this and that. And that's really something I kind of pride myself on is making sauces and moles and things like that. And that's something I do pride myself for. We have a lot of moles at the restaurant. We have a lot of sauces and agua chiles, things like that. And that's something that I think, coming up as a young cook, if there's three things that you should really focus on, in my opinion, is knife work, butchery, and sauce work. Yep. And I think if you have those three tools in your belt, you can go to any restaurant and you can excel and succeed, and you can learn and you can transform.
When you think about the success that you've accumulated in your career, what has been the thing that you're like, I could look back on my legacy and say that makes me super proud, or I'm really proud of this? Or is there something that you're working on that one day you're going to look back on and say, if I accomplish this, this is going to be the legacy? Well,
first off, I think that defining success in the culinary industry has many, many meanings, and
what does it mean to you?
I don't know. I don't know how to define it accurately. To be honest, what I say that I've had, what I consider myself a successful chef. I think that I've had a lot of great accomplishments that I'm proud of. But I think a success is something that you much like being a cook or a chef, you learn every day and you can continue to learn forever. I think that success as a chef is really kind of gauged by this perpetual challenge to try and reach something. Some people define it by the number of restaurants, the profitability. Sure. I think that that's one pillar of it. As a restaurateur, you want to have a restaurant that's profitable and can outlive you. And I would love to have that. And I think that that's a good definition of success as a restaurateur. As a cook or, an executive chef, I think that success can be defined by the amount of talent that you are supporting and mentoring. They're going out and also accomplishing things. For me, I really love to support my team and give them any opportunities I can. And that's part of networking in this industry is like, people always hit you up, right? They're like, Andre, I'm looking for a sous chef for this job, or I'm looking for an executive chef. And for me, if that ever happens to me, then my mind goes to, who do I know that's busting their ass that unless you put them out of the comfort zone, they're never going to have this chance. Right. And I'll be like, okay, so-and-so has been killing it. He probably would never have the guts right now to go apply for this position. It's just like, you need to go talk to this guy and get yourself out of that comfort zone. And that's a definition of success for me, is helping other people attain new levels.
So when you look at success, so you have, like you said, there's success in the kitchen, there's success in mentorship and helping people, there's success with growing what you've done, and then there's the impact that you make on the way people eat and introducing new ways to think about Mexican food. In your case in particular, I'd like to talk about that. I think one of the things that you've done really well, especially here in Austin, is before Bacalar, there wasn't a restaurant like this. No one, at least not that I know of, no one was looking at food from Mexico in this city the way that you're looking at food. And I guess my question is, what are some things that you're really proud of with the current menu at Bacalar, and also hoping to educate people with that style of cuisine?
Yeah, I think that, the food that we're doing at Bacalar is really, obviously, whenever you open a restaurant, you want to be different, you want to be unique, but you also don't want to create something that's so unfamiliar that it scares people away. So we do have things that are, low-hanging fruit and people can identify with. But there's a lot of things, for example, we have a dish called kibis, and it's of Lebanese origin. And I grew up eating different varieties of kibis in my household. And, up until I was a teenager, I thought that was a Mexican dish because my mom made it so much. And that was part of like this small little pillar that really drove me to want to do this type of restaurant. It was like all of these different, influences of cuisine that have created, specific regions of Mexico is what really kind of drove this restaurant. So I think that, what I'm most proud of on the menu of Bacalar is you can find, in each section of our menu, you can find different influences that have kind of grown out of the Yucatan that you wouldn't find elsewhere, whether it's Caribbean or Lebanese, or even, there's some Asian influences. There's things that are, obviously like Italian even, that have kind of ended up in that area. And I think in a time where there's so many great Mexican restaurants, you look at like the success of like Fermin and Suerte and Este and the amazing things they're doing there. A lot of other restaurants that open try and do what they do. Right. And, and I think it's better to let the people that do what they do it best and create, again, your own cooking voice, your own style, and create something unique. And that's really what, for me, like one of the first things my mom taught me how to cook was cochinita pibil. And that was just like, that's obviously a very common dish now. And you see that in restaurants everywhere. But how can we do that better and different? And how can we create a unique version of that so that people leave with a very, very good food memory? And that's really what we seek to do is take these, we have a dish there called polcanes, and a lot of this stuff is really pre-Hispanic, timeless techniques and dishes from Maya civilizations that have just kind of lived on. And part of our ethos there is to educate people to come and eat, and creating, we have this dish called polcanes, and it's a pre-Hispanic Maya dish, and they would take pumpkin seeds and take hot stones out of a fire and then put them on the pumpkin seeds and crush them and smoke them. And then they'd mix them with herbs and chiles, and then they'd put it in masa and then fry them. And that to me is fucking really cool, because you see something like that in other cuisines, whether it's a fritter or something like that. So doing our version of that and sharing that with people, it's such a unique flavor and texture and thing, and people need to know that, right? Or it gets lost. And you can call it modern Mexican cuisine, but I don't really love the words modern Mexican, to be honest.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not necessarily modern. It's just like rediscovering.
Yeah. What's modern today is going to be timeless in 20 years.
Right, and there's nothing new under the sun. I like that. I know you spent some time at Noma, And I feel like, I don't know for certain, so I want to ask you, because I feel like when I've eaten at your restaurants a couple of times, I've tasted some sneaky fermentation, some sneaky umami in there, things that I'm like, oh, this is really good. What did you do here?
Yeah.
Because it's unfamiliar to me, because I didn't grow up in those kinds of kitchens, in those Nordic kitchens or anything like that. So when I see those techniques, I know I don't know it, so it's new and interesting to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure you're sneaking some stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, so I staged in Copenhagen, and then I worked for them for the entirety of the Noma Mexico pop-up. So spending time in Noma is a relative term, and I don't, I want to clarify on all that. But I will say that being involved in developing the menu for Noma Mexico was transformative, and it was the first time ever you go into one room and every ingredient out of every corner of Mexico was in the same place. And it was amazing. And then taking the tribal knowledge of Rene and his team in Copenhagen and transforming all of those ingredients and, these masa misos and these, the grasshopper garums and all of this crazy fermented shit. I mean, it was really, really mind blowing. And that was a lot of what I carry in my tool belt, and finding ways to use byproduct, through fermentation and things like that to, like you said, kind of sneak flavors in there and things like that. And it's really been transformative.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he's talking about his restaurant in particular. He's like, what people don't understand about my food right now is you look at it. He's like, everyone's just looking at the food and say they understand it. He's like, but you don't understand it because you haven't tasted it. Once you taste it, you're gonna be like, there's so much layers and fermentation and all these ingredients that you're unfamiliar with in cooking processes. It looks like what you know, but when you taste it, it's like nothing you've ever experienced before. And I think that's very similar to your food. When I look, it's like, oh, I look at, sometimes I'm guilty of that. I'll look at someone's food and like, I get it. I don't want to go eat at that restaurant.
Yeah.
I see what it looks like. I've had that before, but then you try, it's like, oh, that wasn't what I was expecting.
No, for sure. And and Kevin, Kevin Fink, I think that's something he's done really well at Emmer and Rye. And, Kevin also spent some time in Noma, and I think that he carried that with himself. Their fermentation program is probably the best in the city. Yeah. They've got someone, dedicated that solely. And
full-time larder.
Yeah. And when you're using those layers of fermentation and umami and building that into your food, it's incredible. And people often wonder, like, I mean, when you have their cacio de pepe, I think there's like fermented tomato water in or something like that. And it's like, it's amazing.
I used to have a joke on Chef's PSA. I was like, before they were larders, they were sauciers.
Yeah. That's true.
Before they were larders, they were sauciers.
No, that's absolutely true.
I want to transition into this show, Chef's PSA. A lot of the people that listen to it, young cooks, young chefs, and they're looking for guidance. So I want to go with like best advice from you.
Yeah.
New cook, what advice would you give them? Someone coming brand new into the industry, what is something that they need to know right when they start?
I think first and foremost is to find a restaurant that if you want to go work at a restaurant to get into cooking, go work somewhere where you absolutely love the food. I think a lot of mistakes that young cooks make is they go and try and get their foot at a door at a restaurant because it's the coolest restaurant or the hottest restaurant, even if they don't love the food. And I think the minute you start working at a restaurant and cooking food that you don't actually love or inspired by, you don't really find your momentum or your path with it, and you don't know how to connect with it. And I think with connecting with the food that you're inspired by is first and foremost the important thing in what you're doing as a young cook, because you start to compartmentalize all of these little things you take away from each restaurant. From this restaurant I learned how to butcher fish this way, and this this specific way here, and from this restaurant I learned how to make this sauce and these style of sauces, and I can take that with me here. You always take something away from wherever you work, right? And I think that if you can't really and honestly connect with those things, you're wasting your time there. Because a lot of people leave, right? You go cook and you're like, how many times have you, as someone from your caliber, a chef, how many times have you had a cook say, "Chef, I'm moving on. I think I've learned all I've learned here. I need something new." And it's just like, well, did you really, or are you just bored?
Right. And honestly, most of the time when people have left me, I'm very honest with people. Like, a lot of people want to hold on to people forever. I don't. If they're going to a better opportunity, I will help them get that opportunity. Yeah. And I will be very honest with someone who's like, you know what, that's a good chef, that's a good kitchen, and for what you want to accomplish, you should go there. But a lot of times I'm like, you probably should, like, you're not ready and you don't know it. you should stay here. You should grow a little bit more. I see blind spots that you don't see, and I would encourage you to stay. So yeah. Sometimes I've never, as a chef, put the restaurant, meaning like, hey, I don't want you to leave, so you need to stay. I might tell them, hey, like, timing sucks. Can you give me a longer notice or something like that? But I will never steer anyone wrong. Like, hey, if it's a good move for you, it's a good move for you. I'm not going to hold you back.
Yeah.
If someone is in a kitchen and you're the chef, how do you recognize the next sous chef? What are some things that they do that make you know, say, okay, they got it. I have my eye on them, and I'm going to work with them to help them become sous chef.
For me, it's kind of the age-old adage of integrity, and what they say, integrity is what you do when nobody's looking, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that identifying the cooks that are doing things that a chef would, quote unquote chef would do without having them ask him to do it, and making decisions that not only, as a chef, you're looking, you're not just looking to make decisions that affect the food or the guests like that. You're looking at financial decisions. And when you have a cook who understands that early without being told to, and it's like making decisions that help the financial, interests of the company, then that's already like a stepping stone of where they're at. So I look at cooks that understand all aspects of the business without knowing it, and they're doing that on their own, and that have really strong fundamentals and are very, very, interested in learning constantly and growing, and are not lazy.
Do you? I know this for me, but I'm just curious for you. Do you normally recognize someone early on in their career, like even if they're super green, like they got it? Do you notice that right away? Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. I think that there are certain things you can see in a cook very, very early on that you just you can't teach, and I think that all as executive chefs or chef owners, you see that right away, and I've seen very, very green cooks come in, and you're like, plate this up, and they just plate this up, and you're like, holy shit, that looks amazing. I mean, and obviously plating is one thing, and that's a very artistic form, but also if you show for me, like, one of my biggest frustrations is when a cook or somebody makes the same mistake twice in a kitchen. Yeah. And I think that I like to look for cooks that understand that you're gonna fuck up, you're gonna make mistakes, we're all gonna, the first thing I tell my team is like, hey, I'm never going to say that I have all the answers. I'm never going to say I'm not going to learn from you. But what I don't want is for all of us to make the same mistake twice. And I think when you see that there are cooks that are not making the same mistakes twice, and they're growing from every mistake they do make, then they're on the trajectory to become great.
If you had someone right now that you were mentoring as a chef, and you wanted to give them really good advice so that they could speed their career up, what advice would you give them?
Something I never did in my career, in my culinary career, is documenting what my trajectory and roadmap. And I think that people are just kind of like, let's see where the wind takes me. And I think it's really important to treat your culinary career, even if you're just a cook or a chef, as a business. And create like a business plan for yourself and say, this is where I want to be in year one. This is want to be in year two. This is what I want to accomplish. These are my goals. And setting goals and finding some kind of tangible, end result for each of them gives you something towards to work to. And it basically is a metric for who you are as a person.
And when do you know when to walk away? Like,
walk away from cooking or your goals, or
I've been in this kitchen for too long, and chef says I'm not ready, I think I'm ready, or I'm not happy. Like, at what point, if you're guiding a young cook, at what point do you say, you know what, you need to walk away and maybe go to a different kitchen or go to a different industry?
Well, that's where I think the importance of anybody at any level having a mentorship. And I think that having someone to mentor you, call it the kitchen therapy, if you will, but, to ground yourself in that. Because a lot of times you're asking yourself these questions internally, right? You're like, hey, am I ready? Am I failing? Am I not ready? Am I good enough? And it's good to have, one of the things that I wish I would have done earlier in my career is find someone that's a culinary mentor and find someone that's a business mentor, and use them as guidance on decisions I make in my life.
That's an interesting point. You're the first person that I've ever talked to that has, like, a lot of us have thought of it, but not everyone's really put that out there, is I do think it's important. Like the culinary mentor and the business mentor are not always the same.
No, they're definitely not.
Yeah, because sometimes you could work under a great chef that knows how to cook and will take you very far in the kitchen, but they couldn't tell you how to open up a business or run a business. Yeah, so I think that's an excellent point.
And I think that it's kind of similar to, obviously I think for people in general, like going to therapy post-COVID was a more common thing, right? Like people just started wanting to deal with their emotions and their thoughts, and and I think prior to COVID, especially in the Latino community, it was very taboo, and it's just like, but I think that there's a parallel there. It's just like it's okay to go find someone to give you guidance in what you're doing in your career, to tell you if you're on the right track, to tell you if you're wrong, to tell you if you're crazy or not. And it's super important.
What's something that you're working on now that you're excited about?
Well, I love both of the restaurant projects I'm working on right now. They're so completely different. And I'm excited about the food. I'm excited about the team. And, I never really call the food in any of the restaurants my food. I always call it our food, because I strongly believe that a menu, whether you truly created the dishes yourself or not, are really compiled of the team, and I always tell everyone it's not my dish, it's our dish.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
I don't want it to be my dish. But the other thing is, I got involved last year with a nonprofit called Hands Offering Hope. And basically it's in a small Maya community where they are creating a culinary school to help train children of the community to become chefs. And there's a lot of funding. The founder is named Amy Dominguez. She is up in the Northeast, and she met her partner in Mexico, and they've really been focusing on it. They bring all these veterans of the culinary community from all over the U.S. We take trips down there, and we do cooking classes, and we help. There's part of the team, the director, the board, who has worked with the CIA and brought curriculum, and it's a very, very, very poor community, but there's this opportunity for people to really pour their heart into something. And there's such a wealth of culinary history and knowledge that can be amplified through that. And I think it's really, really cool and exciting. So we went out there in January, I believe, and we had this big dinner for the community, and there was all these chefs. And there was one chef there by the name of Chef Wilson Alonso, who's like a traditional Maya cook. And he has a restaurant called Yasha where he also does classes. And he showed up, and I've never seen a chef do so many cooking demos simultaneously. Like he literally had like 4 demos set up, and he just put the ingredients on the table, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. Like these kids don't know anything they're doing. And then like 45 minutes later, all of these kids are making these amazing dishes. There's a pib in the ground. I was just like, blew my mind. So it was super inspiring. It was super inspiring to go cook with these kids, and they look up to you as inspiration, and hope. And it's just, I never forget when I was leaving on the last day, there's a younger cook who came up and was just like, tears in her eyes. I can't wait till I graduate. I want to go cook with you in Austin. And it's just like, the minimal amount of work that you put in a small period of time impacts lives tremendously. And it's really, really inspiring.
So Chef, I know you're a big hip hop fan. Me too. We've been to a couple of concerts together. Went to Pusha T, and then we were both at the Wu-Tang Nas concert. Yeah. You play music in the kitchen?
Always. Yeah.
Why? I don't. I never play music in the kitchen.
And my current CDC doesn't loves quiet in the kitchen. Yeah. So there's a little balance. I know when Chef is expoing and closing it down, I respect that. All right, no music. But if I'm closing it down and I'm expoing, there's gonna be music playing.
What are you playing?
It's a mix, I always have a mix, from hip hop to cumbia to classic rock to alternative to 90, from everything. But, I really love hip hop. I love classical music. Yeah. I love, I'm even, a pretty big country music fan. So it's just a mix. And, one of the things I always do is I always ask the kitchen straight. I was like, is this distracting anybody? Yeah. Do you guys want me to turn this off? And everyone's always like, no. And in the middle, when the printer's going off and there's chaos and servers are coming in asking questions, I just love to have the music in the background, kind of driving the rhythm and the momentum. Yeah. And music has just been such a big thing in my life, going back to high school. Like, it's divisive in kitchens, though. It is. Because I did a chef's PSA once. I was like, no music in the kitchen. So I got so much shit for it. And they're like, how dare you, blah, blah. I was like, well, really? I didn't realize it was such a big thing.
Like I didn't know people were that passionate about having music in the kitchen. Yeah, so for me, I like a quiet kitchen. But I mean, if I'm in someone else's kitchen, I adjust.
Yeah. No, I mean, you take the music out of the AM prep team kitchen, and it's, things are gonna fall apart.
I've had to break up fights before because the cumbias, someone wanted a certain song, someone wanted another, and these two girls in garde manger started fist fighting. I'm like, after that, I was like, no more radios in the kitchen.
It is interesting too, because sometimes it's a matter of who gets on the radio first, and you're just like, and there's people talking shit about, what are you playing, and this is driving me insane, things like
Drake versus Kendrick. Is that what they're playing?
There's a mix of
Did you listen to that?
Yeah, I did.
Who'd you think won in that battle, in that beef?
I've never been I think Drake has some great hits, and I don't want to take anything away from what he's accomplished, but I really felt like Kendrick Lamar was kind of smoking him.
He murdered him.
He was murdered.
Yeah. I was listening to that. At first, I heard Drake, and I'm not a big Drake fan either. There's a couple of songs that I like that are catchy, but I like that. I like that gangster shit. Like there's a Raekwon quote that I like. He says, "I want to listen to music that makes me want to punch someone in the face." Like that's the kind of vibe I want. I like that intense hip hop. So when I listen to Drake, it's like, it's not my thing. There's a couple songs that I like, but I thought when he came out, I was like, let's see what he does to Kendrick. And when Kendrick came back, I was like, oh God, like just stop, make it stop. Like you're watching a train wreck now. He's dragging him. But okay, Mount Rushmore of hip hop. Who's on that Mount Rushmore of hip hop for you?
Gosh, I kind of break it up into eras for me. You have like the pioneers of like Run DMC and KRS-One and the Beastie Boys and all of these guys that kind of laid the foundation when Def Jam Records was really getting going. And then there's the kind of this early era where it was people like, Snoop Dogg and Eazy-E and Dr. Dre and NWA. I remember when I was listening to NWA on a Memorex tape that I probably should have been listening to, and my mom would come in. She didn't know a lot of English at the time, but she knew I shouldn't have been listening to that. So that stuff is really, really, really cool to me, But then you get into the era of like, when Tupac and Biggie were battling. For me, Tupac is probably the greatest for me. I love Tupac, and then Wu-Tang was kind of in their own division of their own. And then I think about like really, really talented producers. People like Pharrell and Timbaland and that have.
Do you like any of the new rappers?
It's so different for me. It's so different for me to see like, Kendrick Lamar style and Childish Gambino and things like that,
They're more melodic, like they sing a little bit more, where before they were talking and telling, there was a lot more story. Now I think it's just a little bit different.
Yeah. For me, I love Pusha T. He's one of my favorite artists right now. I think his style and his flow and his just the beats and everything is really, really incredible. I think a lot of it has to do with production, who produces it. But the landscape has changed quite a bit, and you can never go wrong with the classics.
So, best album of all time, is it All Eyes on Me, Tupac's? If you had to say like there's one album that you could listen to forever if you had to, what's that album?
Yeah, I think All Eyes on Me was definitely up there for me, for sure.
What's the greatest hip hop song?
Greatest hip hop song. That's a tough one for me. I'd love to know yours up.
So my greatest album for me, hip hop, one that I could just listen to start to finish over and over, like I was probably listening to it on the way here, is Only Built for Cuban Links, Raekwon. Like I just like, I love that album, and the more I listen to it, it's new sometimes. Like I hear lyrics that I didn't hear before. It means something different. So Only Built for Cuban Links. I love the Purple Tape. Best song for me though is New York State of Mind by Nas. And I think about that because someone told me that he wrote that when he was 16. Pre-Google, just looking at books and dictionaries, like, man, he paints such a vivid story. I couldn't write that now with AI and Google and all this. I couldn't do that now, and he was doing that before all that. So those are my two greatest.
How many rappers do you think are using AI these days?
All of them. All of them. But yeah, I think they're all using AI, by the way, because I use a lot of AI, for editing and whatnot, and I'm good at it. I've understand how to leverage AI, and what I will say is that because I use it a lot, I recognize it now. Like it almost leaves like a thumbprint. So you could almost see like, okay, that person's using AI. I recognize it. And I recognize it now sometimes in hip hop songs.
I'm not a huge Eminem fan, so I don't want, I'm not here to hype on that, but he's one of those artists where I listen to his lyrics. I'm like, some of the shit he's saying is really genius.
Yeah, it really is. He's really good.
I think Jay-Z is also a very, 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 very well-written lyrical rapper as well.
So your Mount Rushmore. How many was that? Four people on Mount Rushmore. Who's on?
Jay-Z is up there.
Jay-Z,
Jay-Z,
Tupac,
Nas, Tupac.
and one more.
Man, I love Busta Rhymes.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I just think he's also in his own category of himself.
So
as a group, though, De La Soul.
yeah, De La Soul's great. So taking that same spirit of greatest hip hop of all time, Mount Rushmore. Who's the Mount Rushmore of chefs for you? Who goes on that mountain?
Mount Rushmore chefs. Jeez. For me, I think it's a little bit different, but I definitely think that people that have inspired me. And a lot of that started with cookbooks, right? So it was like, buying the French Laundry cookbook was one of them. Paul Bertelli, cooking by hand was a very inspirational cook. And I'm not even like a big pasta cooker too, but that cookbook was really inspiring to me. Ricardo Munoz Zuruta from Mexico, Rene Redzepi, Alain Ducasse. Those are
Is that your four?
Yeah.
Ducasse, Redzepi. Who'd you say? Who's the other two?
Ricardo Munoz Zuruta, yeah.
And who was the fourth?
Paul Bertelli.
Chef, last question before we wrap it up. It's always good to see you, but last question for the audience that's listening. You have a billboard out there, Gabe's Chef's PSA, either what to do or what not to do in the kitchen. What do you want people to start doing or stop doing?
Is being disrespectful to each other. And start doing is working cleanly. What are yours? Obviously,
I do them every day. I'm starting to run out of material. That's why I'm asking you. If I had a number one chef's PSA, it would be, it's better to be the worst cook in a great kitchen than the best cook in a terrible kitchen.
Yeah.
And then that would be number one. The second most important chef's PSA is, I always say this, the most important chef's PSA is the right way to do it is the way they do it where you're at. The way the chef wants it done, the way the restaurant wants it done, that's the right way to do it. Those would be my top two. Third one is like working kitchens that you aspire to run.
Yeah, I think the other one for me too is also find the hardest job to do in the kitchen. Yeah, that's a big one for me. Is like you always see the cooks that look at the prep list and go write their name by the easy shit,
radishes.
Yeah. It's just like no one wants to do. Clean the artichokes or anything like that. So I think, one for me is find the hardest job to do in the kitchen and take that on.
Awesome, brother. Well, it was good
Thank you
seeing
so
you.
much.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate
Good
it.
to see you.
I feel honored to be here. This is super cool. And
Yeah, you can.
really inspired by what you're doing.
Obviously, you're always welcome.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Gabe and I. If you want to support the show, you know what to do. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure you leave 5 stars. Nothing less than 5 stars. Go get my new book, Bad Cooks Everywhere. It's available on Amazon. All my books are available on chefspsa.com. And for exclusive content, go subscribe to my Substack. You get early podcasts, free ebooks, some exclusive classes that are only on Substack. We'll see you next week. Hit the porno music.
Yo, it's Andre in the kitchen, mixing, dropping chef knowledge, no fiction, stirring up the beats, heating up the session. Listen close, classes in session.